I struggled a lot with motion controls in Skyward Sword on the Wii. Whether I was pushing back the pirate mini-boss with specific sword motions, twisting my remote to navigate beetles through tight caverns, or trying my absolute best to simply stab straight forward, it just never clicked for me. Which is why I was ecstatic when Skyward Sword HD was announced to have button controls on Switch, so I could finally experience the game trouble-free. But then I started thinking, were the motion controls as bad as I remembered? And if not, how would they hold up on Switch for those who decide to use them? Especially as I realized the Wii might actually be the superior platform for one specific reason that the Switch might not be able to match. So with these questions in mind, I dusted off my old Wii and ran a few tests. In doing so, I quickly discovered that I might have had it all wrong, because I was shocked to see how reliable the motion controls were compared to my first playthrough. I could slash moblins from any direction, stab straight forward with ease, and even enjoy flying the beetle around. Sure, it wasn't perfect, but it was more than reliable enough, which seemed about on par with a lot of players' experiences 10 years ago. And I believe a lot of credit for that goes to the game's ingenious use of the Wii's sensor bar. Even though Skyward Sword used the Wii Motion Plus accessory for every part of the motion control experience, including the parts that were basically just a pointer, it also incorporated the sensor bar in a subtle but incredibly smart way to determine where your TV is in the physical space. You see, a fundamental problem with gyroscopes is that they gradually drift over time, feeling less and less connected as your play session goes on, as they have no outside point of reference aside from gravity. Now, the fix usually only requires you to tap a button while holding a neutral position to recenter the controls, but it still takes you out of the game for a moment, or a lot of moments, as will inevitably be the case. But in Skyward Sword on the Wii, the game can calibrate itself entirely automatically without you even being aware of it, because anytime the Wii Remote happens to see the sensor bar with its IR camera, it instantly updates Link's position to match the Wii Remote's, resulting in a seamless, nearly drift-free experience as long as the Wii Remote can find the sensor bar often enough. But then how is it that my experience this time was so different compared to my horrendous memories of my first time through? Well, I can only theorize, but I have a few different ideas. One is that my Wii Remote might have been mistaking other light sources for the sensor bar, recalibrating to whatever direction those were in instead of the TV. Remember, this thing can be fooled by a pair of candles. I recently experienced this myself when I purposefully unplugged the sensor bar, yet as you can see, the pointer icon appeared for a brief moment, indicating it was mistaking something else for the sensor bar. I spent a few minutes swinging my arm around trying to find the same spot, but had no luck, making its sporadic misfires even more frustrating to track down. If this had happened during sword combat, which it likely did before, it would have thrown things off immensely. However, you can thankfully adjust the sensitivity of the Wii Remote's IR camera to try and account for this. There's also the chance my sensor bar wasn't working properly or wasn't positioned right, preventing the Wii Remote from easily seeing it. Or maybe I simply remember the controls as being worse than they were. The point is, if you experience similar issues in Skyward Sword, your sensor bar setup might have been to blame. Because as long as it's plugged in, working properly, and you're facing its direction, and of course you have just a bit of patience, Skyward Sword's motion controls on the Wii do work well. Most of the time. Which is awesome for the potential of Skyward Sword HD, right? I mean, if the motion controls are better than I remembered, perhaps it will be even better on the Switch. Especially since the Joy-Cons feature gyroscopes that are nearly 10 years newer than those in the Wii Motion Plus. Except there is one major piece missing, the sensor bar, and that has us a little concerned. You might recall that multiple Switch games, such as Pikmin 3 Deluxe and Super Mario Galaxy, have already tried to mimic the Wii Remote's pointer by using just the gyroscope, and the results have been decidedly mixed. While the illusion holds up well in the short term, it only takes a minute or two, if that, for the pointer to drift, forcing you to manually recalibrate with a button tap. It works, but it takes you out of the experience, which is the last thing you want in an immersive, lengthy, and motion controls reliant experience like Skyward Sword. So how bad could it be on Switch really? Well, as we hinted at earlier, you might only have to unplug the sensor bar in the original game on Wii to find out, which should, in theory, offer an experience similar to the limitations of the Switch. And so that is exactly what we tried. Well, at least once we got past the initial calibration, which is the only time it is truly required in the game. And to our surprise, nothing seemed amiss at first. As you can see, my movements were nearly 1 for 1, but first impressions can be deceiving. Over time, the inputs during sword combat become less and less reliable, and without the sensor bar to patch up those broken windows, it gets worse and worse. Sometimes the game assumed I was facing away from the TV, causing Link to hold his sword behind his back. Other times my sword motions were reversed entirely. Swinging up caused Link to swing down, and vice versa. Mind you, these issues normally wouldn't kick in for some time, if at all. But on certain occasions, they became apparent right away. Namely after swinging my arms around a lot, or picking up the controller after it had been resting for a few minutes. Both of these instances threw off the controller to the point where it had no idea which direction was forward anymore. That's what was so helpful and underappreciated about the sensor bar at the time. When Wii Motion Plus was introduced, it acted as a backup for the new untested technology. And even though the tech has improved since, it still hasn't reached a point where it can stand entirely on its own, as Pikmin 3 Deluxe and Super Mario Galaxy clearly demonstrate. And that's what I fear about the Switch version, that we will no longer have the sensor bar to fall back on, requiring constant immersion-breaking manual recalibrations to prevent your movements from feeling entirely disconnected. So what does this mean for the game on Switch? The best case scenario is that the designers somehow figured out a better solution than what we've seen in other Switch games, where the Joy-Con's motion sensing controls remain accurate for however long you play. After all, what better game to really nail this technology with than one that relies on it the most? And in the instances where they do falter, they could still allow us to calibrate the sword controls by simply pressing down on the D-pad, instead of a full recalibration in the pause menu, which is required for sword motion controls on Wii. That is the dream, but then there's the chance that the motion controls won't be as reliable as we hope. Even with the 10-year difference in gyroscope technology, it likely won't be enough to offset the simple elegance of what the sensor bar added. Furthermore, due to the huge length of Skyward Sword and its heavy reliance on motion controls, the issues of this tech could actually be more apparent here than ever before. Right now, it's impossible to know for sure how well the motion controls will work in Skyward Sword HD. It's easy to get excited about the improved technology and other improvements the developers might have made. But as always, the smartest move is to keep your expectations reasonable. The controls could be better, but precedence isn't on their side, as we've already pointed out with Pikmin 3 and Mario Galaxy. Yet both of those games were still great despite the drawbacks. So maybe even in the worst case scenario, it'll end up okay. After all, we now have button controls to fall back on, at the least. So there you have it, a deep dive into how the mechanics of Skyward Sword on Wii could impact the game on Switch. What did you think of this video? Let us know down below. Thanks for watching, and subscribe to Game Explained for more on Skyward Sword HD and other things gaming. Check out the videos on the right for more content you might be interested in, and until next time, bye!